So, all this effort, it has to mean something, right? So, yes, you're at the first ever live recording of the Technically podcast. Woo!
Hello, and thank you for that.
Welcome again. Yeah, so first time we're ever doing a live recording of this monthly podcast we have.
And I'm Zach Seward, so I'm Technically's editor-in-chief.
And I am Christopher Wink. I'm the co-founder and editorial director at Technically. So the podcast we do, it's a monthly exploration. How technology shapes local communities.
That's right, we do this thing every month, and tonight, as you can tell, you're getting a sneak peek at how it's all done. I mean, we don't usually have live music from Pixelator on the ones and twos here.
Yeah.
We don't usually have dancers doing a nice little piece of work a little bit later on.
Okay, yes.
And we definitely don't have your beautiful faces to look at every month. But we do talk to some smart folks in the world of tech. We check in with our reporters in 5 markets, and we produce audio elements from out in the field. So last month, for example, the podcast was about design thinking. Next month, it's all about crowdfunding.
But tonight, we're talking about innovation legacy, which sounds kind of weird, but it's what we're building and doing. Will that stuff last? So it's well-timed. We're coming up on the 5th annual Philly Tech Week presented by Comcast. It's coming up April 17th, April 25th. Yes, we know a little bit of that. 100 events across the week. It's all gonna happen.
Yeah, so for now, if you're not already, that is, please do subscribe to the Technically podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. For those of you here in the audience, here at the Philadelphia headquarters of First Round Capital, you will be a part of this month's episode. And for those listening on your podcatcher of choice, we still love you. We still love you.
We love you here in the live audience, but also this goes out to the interwebs. It's all welcome. You'll hear this. All going out to the internet for the wider world, so we want to hear you, so get involved. But tonight's show, 3 parts.
All right, first you got an audio timeline. It's chronicling how one technology community, Philadelphia, has advanced through time.
Then our lead Philly reporter, Juliana Reyes, she's going to be taking a look at how tech communities are taking on inclusivity. That's where the experimental dancing will be happening.
And after that, Chris here, he talks with celebrated urbanist Richard Florida about how we choose where to live.
But first, yes, technically, we're reporting in 5 markets now. If you don't know us, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Delaware, Baltimore, D.C., all on the East Coast, we organize events and we try to tell the narrative of how these communities are developing. We're following that national conversation of civic technology, rise of the rest, all that great stuff. And we can do it because we are supported by many companies and organizations interested in meeting technologists and entrepreneurs. We love them.
So, seeing as this is sort of a preview of our 5th annual Philly Tech Week presented by Comcast this year, let's hear from Catherine Sontag. She's the Technically Events Coordinator, who you might better know as the sponsor voice, capital letters, from the Technically podcast. Catherine, take it away.
The first ever live Technically podcast is brought to you in part by Comcast, the title sponsor of the 5th annual Philly Tech Week, to be held April 17th through 25th in Philadelphia. PTW 15 features more than 100 events in technology and entrepreneurship. Comcast Business is a leading provider of advanced communication services, including internet, voice, TV, and Ethernet. Comcast Business is built for business, empowers entrepreneurs throughout the region and beyond. For more information, speak with a local business account executive or visit business.comcast.com.
Thank you, Catherine. Great job, as always.
Nailed it.
I
mean, normally, Zach, we're under sweatshirts recording in our office.
True.
And we steal Catherine, interrupt her work, and get her under, and try to desperately record that. She always nails it on one take. Thank you, Catherine. So, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. We just want to also give a quick shout out again to Pixelator, here doing the fabulous electronic music that you're going to be hearing throughout the show. John Myers, he is the audio engineer extraordinaire, best known as a producer for NPR's Fresh Air, but he's also available for mixing and producing podcasts if you're looking. So hit him up. Big thanks to him for helping us out with tonight's show.
So, all right, we're doing it live. For starters, how does a tech community evolve in the first place? From the dawn of the computer age today, Zachary Seward, he's going to be taking on that issue with some recorded interviews and some attendees tonight to talk about the timeline of how the pieces come together to support what's happening, in this case, in Philadelphia.
So in some ways, we owe it all to the ENIAC. That's the electronic numerical integrator and computer. The first digital general-purpose computer that actually worked was spurred by the war effort and made here by a handful of University of Pennsylvania engineers. ENIAC was the Watson of its day, a room-sized blinking supercomputer that, quote, frees scientific thought from the drudgery of lengthy calculating work. Its founders, they then started their own company, which made the next generation UNIVAC computer, also here in Philadelphia. That machine's stunningly accurate prediction of the 1952 presidential election, from a house in East Falls no less, helped launch computers into the popular imagination. Then came the 1960s, and the founding of the first urban research park in the country. The University City Science Center's Jean Mell has that story.
Thank you, Zach. The Science Center was founded in 1963 with a heady mission to hold on to Philly's brain power. If you've been on the section of Market Street in University City that's designated the Avenue of Technology, then you've been on our campus. We're home to more than 100 fledgling startups and established companies in the life sciences and emerging technologies. The idea is to promote tech-based economic development for Philadelphia and beyond. And we've come a long way since the 1960s. From our earliest residents, SEI, Monell Chemical Senses Center, and Radiation Corporation Management, to today's companies like Graphene Frontiers, Invisible Sentinel, and Spark Therapeutics, we're helping innovators invent the future as they move technologies out of the lab and into the marketplace, where they can have a transformative impact on people's lives.
So the 1970s, they were next, obviously. And you got to remember the context here, right? So by the 1970s, the contraction of Philly's industrial sector, that was already a painful reality here. The empty factories that still litter much of North Philadelphia were hemorrhaging jobs and tossing people out of the middle class. By the end of that decade, conversations in Harrisburg centered on one piece of the job creation puzzle. If the state can help commercialize university research, maybe it could create the next generation of major employers. Those were the roots of the Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Southeastern Pennsylvania. The mission has expanded over the years to include early-stage companies, and to this day, funding from the nonprofit Ben Franklin is a major player in helping launch area startups onto the next level. Born out of the early days of venture capital and private equity in the 1950s, Safeguard Scientifics made its first investments in broadcasting and check writers. Fast forward 30 years, and Safeguard became a market force in the 1980s, providing capital and expertise in technology to companies in the nascent biotech sector. Safeguard Scientific's president and CEO, Steve Zarilli, has more.
Since our beginning, Safeguard has supported entrepreneurs and innovation in a wide variety of industries. We had early successes in television, planting the seeds of what would eventually become Comcast. But the 80s is when we really gained a foothold in the sectors we're known for today, technology and healthcare. MREG, as an example, was Safeguard's first biotech investment, which today develops drugs for the treatment of AIDS. Some of Safeguard's technology powerhouse companies in the 80s included Novell, Rabbit Software, and the local success story, QVC. Successes in the 80s, along with Safeguard's evolution into the world of funding startups, led us into the internet era of the 90s and on to our commitment today to augment Philadelphia as a hub for technology and healthcare IT.
So the 1990s, remember the 1990s, right? That was the era of big dollar valuations and bold new visions for an internet-connected age. Now, Mike Krupit, he was part of that story. He was involved with the e-commerce pioneer, CD Now. Here he is.
CD Now was a pioneer in selling music online. Before Napster, before iTunes, CD Now was where you went to buy music. We rode the wave of the intense growth of the internet, more than doubling every 6 months. We went public with a $342 million valuation.
What?
At our peak, after we merged with Music Boulevard, we employed over 700 people.
What?
Then with the decline of the music industry and the dot-com bust, things quickly unraveled. We lost a lot of momentum and capital on a failed attempt to merge with Columbia House. We continued to lose money on every transaction because of the high cost of technology, innovation, and distribution and fulfillment. Wall Street and investors, almost overnight, changed their benchmarks and expectations from top-line growth to bottom-line health. We ultimately sold CD Now to media giant Bertelsmann. Pioneers take arrows in the back. The ultimate value of the consumer-facing web bubble of the 90s was that it launched a lot of careers. I went on to do Nexploration, Novatorium, Real Food Works with Lucinda Duncalf, who I first met at Infonautics, and now my current high-tech company, Intronet, all culminating in my ability to launch and grow a new coaching practice called Trajectify. So many of those who worked with me at CD Now, and before that Infonautics, launched and built other Philly tech companies. The bubble may have burst on us, and the companies of that era might be gone, but the people are what count. CD Now has been described as a disruptor that got disrupted, but it was a career worth of learning in only 5 years. In addition to the immense and strong personal and professional networks that were created, the lessons and experience at CD Now fueled my career and that of hundreds of others.
The 2000s. Out of that dot-com bubble burst emerged a vibrant network of local creatives and sole practitioners and technologists who were also seeking community. In the 2000s, in steps co-working space Indie Hall. Here's co-founder Alex Hillman with that story.
Independence Hall, not Independence Hall down by the Liberty Bell, but Indie Hall, really started when I looked around Philadelphia in 2006 and wondered, where's my crew? Where are my people? And this was before Nerd Street was a thing, before technically Philly was a thing. At the time, it seemed like any other city had more of a tech community than we did. In fact, I almost left Philadelphia for a job in the Bay Area, but instead, I looked closer and tried to discover who was in my own backyard. And lo and behold, I found people, most of whom told me the exact same thing. I didn't think there was anybody else like me in Philadelphia. And over the next year, the Indie Hall community was born, and subsequently, the co-working space that a lot of people know about. This was in 2007, making Indie Hall one of the early anchors in the nation, really the world's, co-working movement. It's more than just a place with an internet connection and a desk you can sit at. It's become the home for a community of people spanning more industries, from design and development to law and nonprofits, from emerging artists to people like Mark Head, who've been responsible for advancing open data policy in our city. The thing that we all have in common is that we do work that we love, and we do it to make our communities better. We help each other get important shit done. But it's not all serious. We also have a really good time. We've made amazing friendships and relationships, and that's really what keeps things moving forward. And as we start looking ahead to our 10-year anniversary, I'm so proud to look back at all the things we've applied Indie Hall's JFDI spirit and lessons to, from launching a farmer's market to experiments with co-housing in Kensington, and more people that we're able to help in other cities around the world, from South Korea, New Zealand, across Europe, and pretty soon we're going to be working with some folks in Africa. And we're working with all of these people to make their cities and communities better, to help them find each other. And best of all, we get to do it while deepening our community's connection to each other and the rest of Philadelphia.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Now, throughout this period, there was a quiet giant taking center stage and then some in the 2010s. From a fledgling cable operator in the South to one of the world's largest media companies, Comcast became an iconic Philadelphia innovation brand. Sam Schwartz, who's the Chief Business Development Officer for Comcast, tells us how.
The startup story of Comcast begins in 1963 in Tupelo, Mississippi, but our future is very tied to Philadelphia. In 2008, we opened Comcast Center, our global headquarters, and Philadelphia's tallest building. In 2011, we acquired NBC Universal, one of the country's best-known media brands. And last year, we announced plans to acquire Time Warner Cable. Today, we're innovating faster than at any other time in our history, creating cloud-based platforms, apps, and the future of entertainment, all right here in Philadelphia. Today, we're a global media and technology company. This year, we're continuing construction on our second tower in Philadelphia, the Comcast Innovation and Technology Center, the future home for Comcast's technologists, engineers, and software architects. 50 years after our founding, we haven't always been perfect, and we know that we need to make customer service our best product. But we're transforming as a business. We're no longer a cable operator alone. We're a media company, preparing for how we all live, work, and play in the future. Comcast could be a lot of places. We're proud we're innovating in Philadelphia. Our footprint starts here in Center City specifically. This ecosystem of technologists and entrepreneurs is one we want to work with and add to. Tech communities around the country are doing the same thing, tying together their organic communities with startups, universities, institutions, and large brands. Together, we're all better.
Sam of Comcast, thank you. So we're in the 2010s, we're halfway through, but what about Philly's future? These threads, they all weave into one of the more varied tapestries of industry sectors in the US, and each obviously is going to continue to evolve. Health IT is a very real anchor of the region's tech future, the merging of its life sciences legacy and its emerging strengths in programming and web development. But another thread that's going to make Philly stand out going forward is the social enterprise sector, using for-profit approaches to fixing deep-seated problems. Christopher Gray's Scollay has a social mission, helping more students afford college without taking on crippling debt. Here's his story.
4 years ago, I came to Philly from Birmingham, Alabama, after winning about $1.3 million in scholarships myself. And one of the first things I started doing here was I actually started working with local Philly students of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and I found that the hardest part about helping these students was actually helping them find the funds that they needed to apply for to get the funds that they need. And that really actually inspired me to create Scollay, which is, some of you guys may know, is an app that helps students find money for college. So since then, the hard work has put us on Shark Tank, Forbes, like we were chosen in Inc. Magazine's one of their top college startups. We've helped students raise over $15 million. Now with Shark Tank, we have like over hundreds of thousands of downloads. We scored a deal with Damon and Lori, and I really appreciate that, the fact that it started right here in Philadelphia. We're getting ready now to raise our Series A round, and we plan to actually stay in Philadelphia, create more jobs, and really start to help as many students as possible here in Philly and across the nation.
That's news, actually. You heard it here first. So that's the timeline. The future is always an exciting thing to cover, especially as it's unfolding. Thank you.
So innovation has a legacy. That's the point there. Creativity and new thinking, they're evolutionary acts. They also require small bits of inspiration. Technology communities have always prided themselves on that, pairing it together. But as this new wave of tech and creative culture has crashed into cities across the country, Baltimore and St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Boulder, Atlanta, we've also had to face that for lots of reasons. Technology communities don't always look representative of the place they're growing out of. So for the listening community, I'm a white male. That means when I go into a tech event, there's usually people who look like me. And that's not the case for everyone. Technically Philly lead reporter Juliana Reyes teamed up with dancers Marcel Williams-Foster and Kamar Jewell to explore that very challenge with a personal essay, and we'll get some of the sound of the dancers for the podcast as well. But can we bring them up?
So at last year's Philly Tech Week, a group of dancers they performed a dance choreographed by tweets from the audience. Each tweet corresponded to a dance move. Project lead Marcel Williams-Foster told me it was a lot like coding in that way. The project was called GPS Bodies, and we liked it so much that we invited them back to make this essay come to life. So here's where it starts. It's a summer morning 3 years ago, my first time at the University's City Science Center. I'm there because a vintage Philly startup called Infonautics is having a reunion, and I'm supposed to write about it. It's my second day on the job as Technically Philly's lead reporter, and I'm overwhelmed. The panel of former Infonautics staffers, they keep calling themselves Infonauts, and I'm like, what? They talk about run rate, valuation, cloud-based infrastructure, and when I get back to our office to write the story, I'm frantically scanning Wikipedia, trying to understand what any of it means. I read the entry for .com bubble at least 3 times. I finally finished the story, but I was worried. If it was this hard now, How was I going to write about these things every day? What if my boss realized he had made a mistake by hiring someone who didn't know anything about tech? That was when I felt most excluded from the tech scene, at the very beginning. Even though, as a woman of color, I was something of an anomaly at tech events, I never felt excluded because of that. It was hardest for me when I was an outsider, when it seemed like everyone in the Philly tech scene was talking in a foreign language and I was just pretending to understand it. Fortunately for me, because of my job, that changed fast. I stopped getting nervous and sweaty every time it was my turn to introduce myself at a tech meetup. I started to feel a little more like I belonged. That one big moment came when a story subject, upset at how I had covered his story, questioned my ethics on that pinnacle of local startup talk, the 1,000-person strong Philly startup leaders listserv. I was watching the Braves, sorry Phillies fans, at the playoffs alone at a bar when I saw it. More than a dozen responses to the thread bearing my name. And everyone was defending me. The Braves lost that night, but I was glowing. They liked me. More importantly, they didn't think I was a hack. But as I found my way into the tech scene, I started to realize that not everyone felt the way I did. I wrote stories about projects like Lady Hacks, a hackathon for women, and Digital Service Fellows, which trained Philly public school students in tech support. And I realized that entrance to a tech community wasn't always as straightforward as mine. To get a sense of what I'm talking about, we asked our Twitter followers, what does an inclusive tech scene look like to you? And here's where I'm going to ask the dancers to help me. Some of the tweets talked about the inclusivity of physical spaces. @GL Keeney said, accessibility, accessibility, accessibility. Imagine using a wheelchair, crutches, etc. in the scene from your pick. And we had tweeted the question with a photo from our Tech Jobs Fair last month.
I think I would call that zooming in on topic, because it's taking something very specific and really running with it. And for us, zooming in on topic looks like this.
@Eagle Apex said, social events hosted someplace other than a bar.
Okay, so that's located when you're indicating location. Location is...
Another person talked about how a tech scene could make you feel. Carrie Benjamin said via Slack, you feel respected and you feel safe being who you are.
Okay, because it's talking about respect and safety, we would call that expressing feeling, which looks like this.
We also asked, when was the time that you felt excluded by the tech scene? We heard from women who felt excluded by the culture of their workplace. @Miss Facetious said, group lunches at work, but not with me, because there are other guys there and they might, quote, talk about sports.
Okay, so that's small talk, and there's a move for small talk as well. Let's go.
@Craze Lazetta said, the lab I worked in was mostly women techs, but half the supervisors were male, and men were clearly being groomed.
Probably expressing feeling, yeah. Which once again looks like this.
Let's bring in some music to get a better sense of this dance. I'm going to read the tweets again to prompt the dancers, and what you'll see after is how this code that the dancers created can be repeated, kind of like a computer code itself. Accessibility, accessibility, accessibility. Social events hosted someplace other than a bar. You feel respected, and you feel safe being who you are. Group lunches at work, but not with me. The lab I worked in was mostly women techs, and men were clearly being groomed.
Oh, so you see a series of steps, and we also have what we call algorithm, which changes the actual staging. So, you want to do algorithm 1, 2?
Let's just do 1.
Okay, here we go.
5, 6.
different staging. Algorithm 1, sound like a computer program. That's all we got.
So reading these tweets and others we got made me see how many different ways you can think about tech inclusivity. You know, it's not just about gender or race or class. There's so many things that can affect a person's experience and let them in or keep them out. I started to see that through my reporting and how some people are kept out while others overlook what seems like little things, like having a diverse lineup of speakers at events or instating a fair maternity leave policy, or not only describing company culture as foosball and kegerators. And to be honest, I started to get a little angry. It was like the mainstream culture of tech was so skewed toward one type of person, but how can we talk about changing the world? How can we live up to the promise of technology if we're leaving all these people out? And was there anything that I could do about it? And then it hit me. Duh, I'm a tech reporter. People read what I write, which means that I have some power to shape the tech scene. I mean, if I write about it, it becomes part of the tech scene. So I could write about the young black technologist who wants to build a flying car, or the dance troupe that wants to help gay youth use dating apps safely. And I could open people's eyes to what else the tech scene could be. I also realized that as a reporter, I had the power to ask hard questions and hold people accountable. So if a big tech conference had a pathetic percentage of women speakers, I would ask them why, and they did. So I'm sure that sounds great, but here's the reality. It's not that easy to write stories like that all the time. In fact, it's usually harder to do those types of stories, to find them, to write them. It just takes more time. And sometimes, I'm just trying to get the daily stuff done. I'm just trying to handle my inbox. I think that's something we all struggle with. Balancing the day-to-day with the bigger picture, juggling your everyday responsibilities and the social responsibilities that you strive to fulfill. Those things that are worth fighting for. The ones that are really important to you. Thank you.
How a tech community blossoms, how we need to be deliberate in being more inclusive. Those are the big ideas for creating an innovation legacy that we can be proud of. But what about the most important unit of measure? How do people like us choose where to live, where to build, where to create? Chris Wink has one entrepreneur story.
Thank you, Zach. So, I've been reporting on early stage tech companies for 6 years now. I've talked to a lot of founders in lots of places in the country. Mostly I've approached those questions and those conversations in a weird way for tech press, a local one. How will your scalable software impact others who live here? Why are you building a mobile dev team here? What benefit do your e-commerce sales get for being managed here? People are different. Some care a lot about where they're doing the work they're doing. Some people don't think it matters that much. But for almost all, I've always found a kind of mixed-up uncertainty about when we ask those questions. Because for us mobile and privileged and educated knowledge workers, we often have moments where we ask ourselves, are we where we're supposed to be? It's something I've talked about with this guy I know.
My name is Wes Garnett. I am from Wilmington, Delaware. I've lived here my entire life, all 32 years. I'm an entrepreneur. Currently I'm working on a product surrounded around health and wellness for people living with chronic conditions.
So we publish in Brooklyn and Philadelphia, Baltimore, and DC. There are all these fantastically creative cities full of fantastically creative people who are exploring the world, but also choosing to work together with those who live nearby. People who go to the same events and hang out at the same bars, maybe even read the same local tech news site. In Delaware, where we also report with an even smaller tech community in those cities, still new at building its network of technologists and founders, it happens too. In fact, we're finding it really happens everywhere right now. Future makers doing the very old act of working with their neighbors. And this is important because the very nature of what we're building and how we're building successful and diverse communities has changed. I had a conversation about this with Richard Florida. He's a global research professor at NYU, this pop urbanist. You know him because he wrote the book Rise of the Creative Class. He said he talked about that change with another academic not so long ago.
And I asked him the same question you did. I said, you asked me, what is the difference between economic development yesterday and today? And he said, we're no longer big game hunters. We fashioned ourselves big game hunters out on the safari of economic development, hunting the big game. Now we really have to do the things which cultivate a wide variety of smaller things. As Jane Jacobs would have said, we have to build this kind of organic, up from the bottom, harnessing people's energy. And it's a much harder thing because economic development no longer is that one shot at a big game, the big factory. Economic development is doing 1,000 little things.
And in a place like Delaware that has lost automobile plants and suburban factories like so many other places, Wes, the guy we talked to, he's the star of the future. He's one of those 1,000 little things. He's leading a 4-person team, building health IT software, selling it to big hospitals. He's already a landmark success story for tiny 70,000 person Wilmington. And for all the downtown credit card companies and law firms there, Wilmington still also has this violence problem, has an education and schools problem. But there's Wes, a native of Wilmington, going to Delaware Technical Community College, getting a user experience job. Then in 2010, he co-founded the city's first co-working space. At a startup weekend a few years ago, he founded Kirby, that startup he talked about. He's helping with people with chronic conditions build healthy daily routines. I've known him for a few years now. We all know someone like him in any of these nascent communities. He's likable, and he's smart, and he's cool. People want to know him. They want to hang out with him. He's part of this first generation of Delaware tech entrepreneurs, the kinds we've seen in those other cities, the cities you know. He helps make it easier for others to stay. And I meet with people like him at the Coin Loft, that co-working space he co-founded. And he's part of this growing conversation about an innovation corridor in Wilmington, a short walk from the Amtrak station. That's why I was a little surprised when sitting in a conference room at the Loft, he said this to me.
In about a month or so, I'm moving to Madison, Wisconsin.
Wait, what? Moving to Madison? Now, all respect to Madison. Madison's the home of a brainy university. It has a major healthcare customers there. They also spin off a lot of talent that he could hire. It's a small city like Wilmington, but it's safer, and it's cleaner, and it's full of other young and cool business leaders like him. Technically, we've done for years this semi-regular feature in all our markets. We call it exit interview. Simple profile of a technologist or an entrepreneur who's leaving the market they live in. We ask why, try to put it in a broader context, and better understand that perception of place. And nothing we've ever done has consistently gotten people mad at us than our doing those exit interviews. Because each one stings. Sure, people leave cities all the time. We know that. There's always been a natural flow of people in and out of cities. But whenever a small community, like a tech community in a new market, is growing, trying to raise its standards and get more serious to do better work, welcome new smart people, it depends so much on the early leaders. They're all committed together. The trailblazers, the people who give up that exploration to dig in, connect the dots, and make something special there. When someone leaves, it's like a little tear on that community. Years on, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, DC, there's less angst when someone leaves a tech community. There are more hands on the steering wheel. But Wes, in Delaware, can't we keep him at home?
I hit a point working here at the Coin Loft, I hit a point where I realized if I wanted to see startup activity happen, like, I hadn't built a startup. So, like, how could I tell people what I think it could be?
And he's doing the things that he thinks he has to do to get it done. And it's happening all across the country, right? People are moving. In the sense of tech communities, they're moving to find that customer, find that co-founder, that investor. Richard Florida, he's not so worried about this. He says this is the shakeup of a mobile workforce.
So all of these assets, and I really think for the entrepreneur, it's really a question of do you want to go to a place that's emerging? Do you want to go to a place that's done? And, you know, I've always called this who's your city, right? You have to make the best decision for you. And I think that really depends on what you want to take on and what you want to achieve. But in my mind, at least from what I'm seeing, is that there's a lot of younger entrepreneurs who really like making a place better. And the one place that comes to mind when I think about that is, you know, what's happening in downtown Detroit.
So Detroit or Baltimore or DC or wherever, so when you can build a business or have a career anywhere, the focus instead is now about building that best community for the people you want to attract there. So you can't fault someone for leaving. You have to thank them for what they've done for a place and just ask that they help spread the good word of your community elsewhere.
Madison is just a good place for me as a person. It felt so much like home that I literally thought at one point that I could hop on 95 and come back home real quick.
And so all that sense of place, it got me thinking that we don't actually choose a place to live. We choose a time in a place to live. Maybe Wilmington in 2013 was right for Wes. Madison in 2015 will be better. Maybe for you, it's DC in 2015 and Chicago in 2016. If Brooklyn in 1998 was right for you, maybe Baltimore is right for you now. Or maybe not. The point is that it doesn't matter. That's what's happening now. Video conferencing and social media, it doesn't make places matter less. It makes them matter more, but it can matter more everywhere and anywhere. No one should ever make you feel badly about where you want to live. We've worked so hard to create this mobility. We're only now experiencing it in work and life. The only work worth doing then is making the best version of wherever you live, even if that might just mean it's better for someone in the future that's not you.
And I don't want people to get discouraged that like someone that they thought was a representative of the tech community is like leaving the tech community. You know, I wouldn't describe it as leaving to me. I think I just describe it as like replanting in different soil so that the nutrients that come out of the venture can actually feed, you know, the thing that I care about the most.
So find the right place in the right time for you. Be happy and let others do the same thing. Thank you.
That's it. That's how you build an innovation legacy, everybody. Pack it up, go home. Let's do this, all right? That's also this month's Technically podcast.
What? Can we give a round of applause for that? That was fun. Weirdest tech business event ever.
Probably. Etch it in the books.
Where's the panel and the round table? What's going on?
Can we get that? Can we get that next? Hey, we should mention again that you can subscribe to this thing. It comes out every month. It's on iTunes, Stitcher, you name it.
You can do it right now.
You can do it right now. You can find it. But yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us at this live podcast.
Hold on, Zach.
What?
We got one more thing.
Wait, what?
As our loyal listeners, you know, right? Like, every episode, we close with the Technically TIL. We have to share something that we learned today in our reporting.
Yeah, that's true. This is true, actually. Yeah, but it's a little different today. So, you know what I want to do? I want to bring up Kate Leschko. Kate Leschko is our events director. What's up, Kate Leschko? So every now and then on the podcast, I have the joy of turning to Kate when we want to talk events. So, hey, Kate, how you doing?
Hey, Zach. Thanks for having me.
So, are you ready to do this thing? You ready to do your Technically TIL?
I've been waiting my whole life.
Oh, you're ready?
I'm ready.
You ready to go?
Yes.
All right.
Today, I learned that there are more than 24 video game studios in Philadelphia. And these are indie 1 or 2 person shops that are building mobile apps or interactive games for tablets. And many of them are going to be at the kickoff to Philly Tech Week, which is the arcade at Dilworth, happening Friday, April 17th, right outside of City Hall. This is just going to be one of 100 events that's going to happen throughout the week, and please check out the full calendar at phillytechweek.com.
Thank you, Kate. That was great. That was amazing.
Let's go.
And you know that explosion of like small game studios, it's both changing the economics of gaming, and it's also changing what it means to have a game scene. So cities across the country have these burgeoning pockets of indie game makers, and I think that's really cool. So that's the spirit of Philly Tech Week that I love, and what we report on in all our cities day in, day out. You know, cool stuff that you have to be around to discover first.
Gotta be there. That's it. We gotta go. Give a big round of applause for Pixelator, produced our music. John Myers on the mic. We got Zach Seward, Juliana Reyes, Marcel Williams Foster, and Kamara Jewell. Our dancers, Kate Leshko, Catherine Sontag, my co-founder Brian James Kirk.
And shout outs to the rest of the Technically team, including Peter Erickson and Carrie Bedigol, and our lead reporters Stephen Babcock in Baltimore, Brady Dale in Brooklyn, Lolita Closell in Washington, D.C., and Melissa DePento in Delaware. Thank you so much to our live audience and our host for the evening, First Round Capital. And to you, our listeners at home, in the car, biking to work, wherever you may be hearing this. You'll hear from us next month.
Bye, listeners. Bye, live audience. Thank you.
Bye.